Our next guest in the Toyota Solutions studio is a CEO, an entrepreneur, a founder of her own company, and a 2016 Toyota Mother of Invention recipient, KOMAL AHMAD. It's such a pleasure to have you here in the studio. From what I understand, your company actually addresses two problems we face in the world, food waste and feeding the hungry. Talk about your app and Copia and how it all works.
Sure, thank you for having me here. So the way Copia works is businesses and event organizers can request pickups of their surplus food. And so it's usually high quality food, and they'll say this is the smallest size vehicle it can be fit into, this is when it needs to be picked up by, this is the exact location. All of this information is then sent to a virtual marketplace. And our back end then matches that exact amount and type of food to the nearest nonprofit or nonprofits that get accepted at that day, in that time, in that quantity. Wow. And it'll dispatch one of our food heroes to go pick up that food and then drop it off. And then as a full circle, we'll provide photos and testimonials to the people that were fed directly to the food provider. So they get to see the impact that they made by spending less than 2 minutes of their time essentially going Copia.
So the social impact is clear for the company. What other incentives do they have to donate their leftover food as opposed to just throwing it away?
Yeah, great question. So they also receive enhanced tax deductions for donating their food. So regardless of whether you're a corporation, an organization, you can also get this write-off. And it ends up being essentially $1 per pound of food that you donate. So we're also giving you access to money you would have otherwise left on the table, or worse, in the trash. Along with that, there's corporate social responsibility benefits. There's obviously PR benefits that you have to essentially doing the good.
There's just the moral responsibility of like wasting all this food. My first job was at an au bon pan, and I remember at the end of the night we would have all these leftover baked goods, and that company made it a point to send it to the local homeless shelter to actually drive it over, but to have an app for it. I've heard this described as the Uber of food donation. Is that an apt description?
I mean, Lyft for food recovery works too.
Okay, Lyft may be better for a women's empowerment conference. Talk about how the recognition from Toyota and the Mother of Invention grant that you received last year, how did that help you propel your mission forward?
Yeah, so one really great example, recent example was, so Frida Pinto was actually at the LA salon that I was receiving the award at.
The actress.
The actress, yes. And so she saw me receive the award. She was like, I was super inspired. And she said, you know, I went to the Golden Globes and I saw myself how much food was actually wasted. And it reminded me of you. And she said, so I asked Tina Brown for your information. And then we get on the phone, and I didn't expect her to be on the phone. But she said, you know, I was wondering if you'd like to start a pilot in LA, because we are operational throughout the San Francisco Bay Area currently. Okay. And starting with the Oscars. And I was like, yeah, I think we could do that. We could make that happen.
Was that scary at all, just the amount of food that you must have to deal with?
So we actually did the Super Bowl earlier. So we recovered 14 tons of food.
You've done the Super Bowl with
this? So anything between the Super Bowl to the Academy Awards we can handle. And so anyway, so we ended up feeding over 1,100 people, all with high quality, bougie food, most of which I can't pronounce.
Yeah.
And
that ended up going to people that really needed the food.
And you know, one of the most extraordinary things is usually, you know, we pick up the food and we drop it off. I don't necessarily see it consumed. But the first day, so all of the food that was from the Women in Film events, so it was all the women that were recognized for an Oscar, we took that food, and it's such great food. Next day, we fed the largest LGBT center in LA, and we actually distributed the food. We saw it be consumed, and it was just so happily consumed. They thought that we were the catering company that was providing this food, and it was just, it was so telling, right? I was at the event the night before, and I saw, you know, this great food that you and I would eat, and now it's being consumed and it's being provided with dignity. Yeah. And it's just a really great, amazing circle where everyone can win.
How did you know that this was a need? What was the inspiration?
A few years ago, I was a student at Berkeley, and I was walking down Telegraph Avenue when I encountered a homeless man begging for food. And something about him compelled me to stop and invite him to join me for lunch. And during lunch, he sat across from me, just like you are, scarfing down his food. So he was unbelievably hungry. It wasn't, you know, a ploy or anything. And then in between bites, he shared a story. He said, my name is John. I just came back from my second tour in Iraq. I've been waiting weeks for my military benefits to kick in. And because they haven't, you know, I haven't eaten in 3 days. And that really hit home for me. It doesn't matter what your politics are. This is a veteran, someone who had given the most selfless sacrifice for our country, only to come home to face yet another battle, and that was of hunger and homelessness.
Right.
And then adding insult to injury, right across the street, Berkeley's dining hall is throwing away thousands of pounds of perfectly edible food. And so it's this very stark reality of those who have and waste and those who are in need and starve, and those two people literally right across the street from one another.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And what I realize is this is emblematic of a much larger problem, and that's that every single day in America, over 365 million pounds of perfectly edible food is wasted. So not last night's pad thai or this morning's half-eaten croissants, but untouched, unopened, amazing food.
Yeah.
And while that's happening, 1 in 6 don't know where their next meal is coming from.
So what are the main targets? I mean, you mentioned a great one, which is immediately what I thought of, which is school dining halls.
Yes.
Have you been able to co-opt those types of institutions?
So that's exactly what we're going after. So we're going after the businesses, the organizations that have food 260 to 365 days a year, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So the universities, the hospitals, the stadiums, the arenas, the grocery stores, those are the catering companies. Those are the kind of organizations we're going after. So high volume, high quality food. That is on a regular recurring basis. And so then we also, on the other side, we also find hundreds of nonprofits. So from veterans organizations to after school programs to refugee organizations. So going back to the Oscars example, we took all of the food from the post-Oscars Vanity Fair party, and we fed 40 refugees from Syria and Iran who had just come to America. It was their first group meal in America, and it was food from the Vanity Fair party.
You bring up Syria, and it reminds me of that sort of cliche when you're a kid and your mom says, eat all the food on your plate because there are kids starving in Africa.
Yeah.
There are kids starving in Iraq, there are kids starving here, there are kids starving in Syria. Have you thought about whether globally there's any potential here?
Yeah, so we say we're solving the world's dumbest problem. In a world with so much technology, so much innovation, so much abundance, issues like hunger shouldn't exist, especially when we waste 3 times as much food as there are mouths to feed.
Yeah.
And so, it was one of the most extraordinary things. Senior government officials in Germany and Austria reached out to us and they said, we want this technology, we want you to help expand, we want to help you expand here to help redistribute food and other resources to the Syrian migrants. Right? A use case I couldn't have possibly fathomed. But you think about that, you think about disaster relief, you think about, we want to be the most effective and efficient platform for the redistribution of resources, period. And it's starting with food, but then it can go to medicine, medical supplies, books, clothing.
Because you've designed a system, basically.
Right, and it's not a scarcity issue. It's a logistics issue, right?
And an efficiency and sort of distribution issue as well. Can I just ask you a few personal questions?
Of course,
like how does KOMAL AHMAD get to where she is as an entrepreneur with a social mission? What were your role models, your mentors?
Yeah, I mean, so many. I have so many. I think one of the things that I pride myself on now is that I surround myself with just badass women.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably one of the most powerful parts of even coming to the Women in World Conference is just you see the badassery that is around the world. And so I think
you hear that term a lot used here. I love that.
Yes, because it is. I mean, it's just on a different level of, I think about it. I'm like, no one's really fighting me about feeding hungry people, right? There's a lot of misinformation. There's people who think you're going to be held liable, which you won't be for donating food. But there's no oppressive regime. There's no my husband's not getting attacked or being poisoned to death. Yeah. There's no dictatorship I'm dealing with, right? They're surviving, and not just surviving. They're thriving in the face of all of that.
Yeah.
And that kind of bravery is, I mean, it's what motivates you forward, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it is definitely a lonely job being a founder, being an entrepreneur. Very few people can understand that.
There must be a lot of pressure as well, because it's sort of your creation.
It's your creation. It's your child,
You're
but
the
it's also
captain.
And you have your team who you're responsible for. You have your company who you're responsible for. Your investors who you're responsible for. But then you're also you're held accountable to a higher mission, right? I can't just walk away. If I do, then 10,000 people don't get fed today, right? That's a huge responsibility.
Do you have ways to cope with that pressure that could be good advice for people like me that doesn't always deal with pressure well?
I think there's not really any other option for me, right? If it's not me, then who? And if it's not now, then when? And so I was born in Pakistan. I mean, my life could have taken so many different turns, but I was born with great parents and I got an education. And with that opportunity comes a great responsibility. And with that responsibility means that you have to make a bigger and better impact. And that's just something that I've committed myself to do.
That's very important wisdom.
Thank
KOMAL
you.
AHMAD, thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
joining us here in
having
the
me.
Toyota Solutions studio.
Thank you for
Congratulations
having
on all your success and good luck.
Thank you. Thanks so much.